This girl reincarnates as a villainous maid in an 18-plus novel and somehow triggers the male protagonist's desire to get spanked and punished by her. In the beginning, we see Haley, a young and beautiful maid, receiving roses from her young master, Jeremy Rosinante. Stunned, she wonders about the reason for him giving her flowers. He calls it a token of appreciation, which she accepts gratefully. She laments his grown-up behavior when he was literally a kid with round cheeks just a few months ago. As she looks him up and down, admitting to herself that he's a grown man now, she notices his bleeding hand. Jeremy admits to removing all the thorns with his bare hands so she wouldn't get hurt, making Haley question his sanity. Her exasperation makes him question if he did something wrong again, and Haley tells him that his body is way more important than hers, so he should not repeat a mistake like this in the future. At the same time, she bandages his hand with her handkerchief while asking if she got her point across. Jeremy sounds disappointed and asks if that is all she has to say about it. Seeing that she's puzzled by what he means, he repeats that she made a promise to him that if he did something wrong, she'd give him a spanking. Haley is left baffled and blushing by this unusual demand. A few months back, she was living an overworked life in the modern world, where she'd sometimes sneak some time out to read novels. From what she last remembers, she was working at a department store as usual when her mother barged into the place. The woman attacked her for going no contact for 3 months and hiding her money that could be used to pay off the family's debts. Moreover, she threatened to break her fingers, making her incapable of shooting. This hit a nerve in Haley, and she angrily pushed her mother away. However, she soon heard her brother approach from behind, accompanied by their father, both of them also demanding a share of her salary. At this point, she was so enraged that she suddenly lost all of her strength and dropped to the ground. Waking up, she finds herself facing a woman dressed in an old-fashioned maid dress. The woman tells her that she's in charge of the second young master from now on. Haley's a bit confused at first, but soon the body's original owner's memories start flooding in, making her realize that she's transmigrated into a novel. The head maid instructs her to keep an eye on the young master and report immediately if he acts suspiciously. The woman also gives her a bundle, which Haley presumes is money, and she's told not to panic in any situation and to stay tight-lipped. As Haley walks out of the office, she is amazed to see that despite being new to this body, this place is quite familiar to her. She finally remembers the novel that she's transmigrated into, an 18-plus novel that revolves around the protagonist protecting his beloved woman in every situation, despite falling into darkness himself. The book is named How to Save the Duke, and she's a supporting character, villainess, to be exact, named Haley Tort. At the moment, she's just a maid using a pendant to hide her true identity and harm the young master, Jeremy Rosinante. But there is more to her identity. She's a princess, daughter of the missing empress, Arya. From what she remembers from the novel, Haley soon became the princess and committed all kinds of evil on her stepmother's instigation. The girl foolishly kept bullying the female lead until the protagonist noticed her and finished her off in a grand manner. As a reader, Haley had found the scene of her beheading really satisfactory. Now reminded of that detail, she feels chills all over her body and worries about her next course of action. The prospect of becoming a princess, free from all sorts of debts, fills her with laughter and hope. She decides to stay away from the protagonist and the female lead while living a carefree life as a princess. However, she's soon reminded of an important detail from the novel. The protagonist had ended up going on a rampage against his love, the saintess's desire, and destroyed the whole world with him. Haley decides that staying low and away from the main couple wouldn't solve the problem. If they're still going to perish in the end, she needs to step up and do something about the situation. So, her first step would be destroying the Rosinante Marquis family. It was this powerful family's wrongdoings that pushed Jeremy to the brink of rampage in the novel. Even the servants treated Haley harshly with Rosinante's backing, so she must erase this family first. For that reason, she'd have to bring Jeremy to her side because even her identity as a princess can't support her enough to finish off such a stable Marquis family. With only 3 months left until the original story begins, she sets out to bring the main character to her side. The mission begins with serving him clean food free from any suspicious medicines. The Rosinante family has been putting drugs in all of Jeremy's meals to brainwash him. With Haley being his head maid, she tricks the chef into handing over the suspicious substance, claiming that she'll mix the drugs in Jeremy's tea from now on. Next, she stops the family's knights from stealing his meals using the same excuse. I mixed the medicine and meat today. It appears that everyone in this Marquis family, including the servants, takes the second young master for trash. The poor guy is isolated on the top floor of the dark annex, all the while being watched by knights. After stopping the food theft, Haley goes ahead to Jeremy's room with probably his first clean meal in a while. The room is plunged into darkness despite it being midday. She moves the curtains to let some sunlight in. Much to her shock, the room is filled with junk, and Jeremy is nowhere to be seen. She stumbles upon a young servant in the bathtub and immediately gets some naughty ideas about the 18-plus protagonist's activities. However, it turns out to be a simple case of room cleaning where the scared servant attributes his unconscious state to the protagonist's curse. He advises her to escape while running away himself. She's left to wonder about this unexpected encounter when suddenly the tip of a sword touches her back. Haley instantly feels the protagonist's dark aura as he asks for her identity. She tries to calm down and pretends to be unaware of the potential harm he may cause her. Instead, she cheerfully inquires if he's the young master since she brought him his meal. However, he's further enraged at her for not leaving immediately after placing his food down. Her response about wanting to greet him is met with surprise. Jeremy seems taken by her cute side profile as she announces that she's his personal maid. On the other hand, Haley is shocked to see a flustered little boy, contrary to her expectations of a handsome grown prince. Shocked, she tries to confirm if he's the young Master Jeremy. Internally, she gushes over his cuteness as the little boy glares at her with puffy cheeks, looking all the more adorable. That's when she's reminded that Jeremy was frozen in growth and looked like a 5-year-old kid for years until he eventually succumbed to the darkness. She instantly apologizes to him in her heart for imagining naughty things about him. She hadn't expected him to be this cute and instantly falls on her knees, calling him Mama, a term used to respectfully address one's young master. Jeremy's left flustered by her unusual request of being allowed to touch his cheeks. It turns out he's rumored to have been cursed with a spell that prevents his growth beyond the body of a 5-year-old. Even the servants avoid going into his room, fearing that his curse may affect them. However, Haley knows that the curse isn't real. It's actually a fake prophecy that the Marquis spread with the help of some priests by bribing them with donations. In fact, Jeremy was born with the power to destroy the whole world, an ability associated with the reincarnation of the god of destruction. The nobles had been waiting for his birth, a child that had inherited the power of the first Duke Turan. He had the ability to rule the world, and the Marquis of Rosinante coveted that power. The man had him kidnapped right after his birth. When Jeremy turned 5, he was locked into the estate's basement while the Marquis started to slowly steal his power. With so much power being forcefully drained at such a young age, Jeremy's growth stopped. This led the Marquis to spread the story about him being cursed. He was then moved to the dark and gloomy annex, with knights keeping watch and stealing his food most of the time. Now faced with someone's admiration-filled eyes for the first time, he tells her to leave immediately. In a flabbergasted manner, Haley respectfully tells him to enjoy his meal while internally fawning over his fluffy cheeks. Meanwhile, Jeremy's surprised to see that the food is not half-eaten, as usual. Haley internally curses the entire staff of the estate before making up an excuse of some rats and mice in the kitchen that she's now taken care of. She promises to never serve him something half-eaten and once again asks him to eat before the food gets cold. Jeremy hesitantly takes a bite, feeling awkward in her presence, and asks about her plans to leave. However, she sticks around, standing at his beck and call, serving him like a true young master. Not used to being treated so well, he asks her why she's treating him, a cursed monster, so kindly. Watching this cute little boy referring to himself as a cursed monster breaks Haley's heart. She asks him, surprised, if he's referring to himself because she's never heard of such a cute monster. She assures him that he's not a monster and that she's glad to have the chance to serve him for a long time. Jeremy appears stunned before suddenly bending over as if in pain. Immediately, the items in the room start being thrown around. Haley identifies the situation as a rampage, a situation caused by rampant power when he gets extremely excited. The only person capable of calming him down would be the Saintess, the woman he's going to fall for in the future. At the moment, Jeremy instructs her to leave immediately, but she decides to stay and help him, even if just a little. She urges him to calm down and take a deep breath. In the middle of all the chaos going around, the trick actually works, and he starts to settle down when suddenly the guards barge into the room, ordering her to leave. This sudden intrusion once again triggers his condition, causing an overflow of power and things to be thrown at them. Haley shouts at the knights, telling them to close the door while a knife flies by, chopping her hair off. Jeremy's dark aura eventually becomes unbearable for her while he himself appears to be in pain. She sits down in front of him and gently holds his hands. Jeremy watches her with his tear-stricken face as she begs him to stop before going unconscious. Haley wakes up in a dark and damp space. She has an unpleasant feeling about being there and wonders if it's her afterlife when she hears some sounds outside. She peeks out of that dungeon cell to find the Marquis Rosinante standing in the middle of the prison, scolding an unconscious man for going on a rampage. The Marquis's assistant suggests splashing some ice water to wake him up, but he dismisses the idea as it may provoke him. Instead, he finds it convenient that the young man is in his true form and relishes the fact that this person unleashes the highest quality of power when in his original form. The next moment, he raises his hand, releasing a dark aura and extracting power from the groaning man. Haley finds herself wondering if she's dreaming when suddenly the unconscious man on the ground opens his eyes. She's shocked to recognize those eyes as those of Jeremy. The next time Haley wakes up, she finds herself in her bed and thinking about the strange dream. She jolts up when reminded of her chopped hair, but eventually calms down with the thought that it can grow back. However, she has to do something about Jeremy's condition, which is way more troublesome than she had expected. She can't afford him going on a rampage all the time. While she's thinking about her next course of action and trimming her hair, the headmaid arrives with the message that she's summoned by the madam. Haley looks confused at the unexpected summon, and the headmaid reveals that it has to do with her being Jeremy's attendant. They walk to the villain's stronghold, and Haley's instructed not to argue uselessly. The only word she's allowed to speak is understood. Once they arrive at the Marquise's chamber, she introduces herself as Jeremy's exclusive maid. The older lady instructs her to move closer before asking if she's aware of her duties as the protagonist's personal maid. It's revealed that the Marquise is suspicious of her since she took the medicine from the head chef under the pretext that she'd add it to his tea. For a moment, Haley is left stunned as she realizes that Jeremy is not the only person being watched all the time. The family is keeping a vigilant eye on her as well. She manages to compose herself before furnishing the excuse that the young master had been leaving his soup unfinished lately. Since the medicine is known to work best when consumed with water, she went ahead of herself and chose to add it to his tea. The Marquise is impressed with her diligence, but Haley finds it hard to trust the compliment, since there's no one trustworthy in the Rosinante family. In fact, the lady doesn't let any chance to harm Jeremy slip by. Not only did she make him sick, but she also sold the medicine containing sacred power that was sent for his treatment by the temple. As Haley wonders about her psychopathic dealings, she's reminded of another psychopath in the family, the Marquise's son. The lady, although calling her actions a bit cheeky, actually finds her dedication quite cute and decides to give her a chance. Haley is instructed to add the medicine to Jeremy's tea from now on. However, she's also warned to be careful with her actions in the future, where she might disappear from the world. The Marquise lets her go with a bag full of coins after she shows signs of loyalty and understanding. On the other hand, Haley feels like she's already at the brink of losing her life when she runs into the Marquise's son, another villain outside her chamber. The eldest son of the Rosinante family, Cyril Rosinante, expresses his dissatisfaction at someone else having met his mother when he came with the same intention. Haley instantly bows down to greet him. In the novel, his father was obsessed with Jeremy. He'd give everything to him while Cyril's mother, the Marquise, was always busy with her outings, leaving the boy alone most of the time. Faced with chronic ignorance and a lack of love from his own family, the young man turned into a psychopath. He blames Jeremy for all of his sufferings, and in the future, he'd take the Saintess's life in pursuit of revenge. Haley, faced with his harmless appearance, resolves to stay out of his way, fearing he may finish her off with even her one wrong move. However, getting away from him seems hard as Cyril starts inquiring if the Marquise is inside and how her mood is. She fears meeting her end at his hands regardless of the response and chooses the safest answer. Can you guess it? She tells him that she has night blindness, a condition that hinders her ability to see properly in dark places, and since the room was dark, she failed to see the lady's expression. Seeing that the eldest young master is looking at her like a weirdo, the girl comes up with a sob story of being too poor to afford care in her childhood. Sela looks puzzled at the prospect of ending up with such a condition from eating fewer carrots, and advises him to eat more of them to avoid ending up like her. Seeing that he's immersed in thoughts, Haley tries to escape quietly but accidentally drops the money pouch, attracting his attention. Cecil immediately gets suspicious. The room that she came out of is a place where the Marquise invites men for late-night pleasures. She instinctively thinks about keeping it a secret. However, Haley is even more anxious to leave and cuts him off, labeling the money as her salary that she's going to spend on carrots. She then runs away after requesting him to take care of his health as well, while the eldest young master watches her retreating back speechlessly. On the other hand, Haley keeps praying for her safety until she's out of his sight. After a safe escape, her deep breaths of relief are interrupted by the two guards stationed outside Jeremy's chamber. The duo asks her if she too escaped from his room while one of them notices the money in her hand. She blames them for causing her to get hit by a book earlier when they interrupted her while she was trying to calm Jeremy's rampage. Haley tries to get insight on how often it happens, and the guard reveals the frequency to be once every 10 days. Finding the interval quite short, she figures out that the original story is going to begin soon. His condition would eventually worsen under the Marquis's relentless pursuit of his power. The man starts cornering him more and more despite knowing that his power is associated with his mental strength. Ultimately, the protagonist would be consumed by his own power, leading to the beginning of the original story. Haley resolves to take him out of this place before that happens. She enters his room to find him still sleeping and urges him to wake up as it's lunchtime already. However, he orders her to leave without so much as peeking out of his blanket. When she tries to look closely, a tall young man swats her hands away while reiterating his wish to be left alone. Shocked, Haley asks who he is and where her young master, Jeremy, is. He sits up, taunting her for not recognizing her master, making her even more puzzled. Haley tries to know what actually transpired there and suggests calling a doctor to treat his red face. Jeremy appears to be at a loss for words to see that she's still worried about him and simply tells her to leave. He refuses to have a doctor over who wouldn't bother with actually treating him. In fact, he expresses his bewilderment at how she's still willing to come to him unafraid even after witnessing all the chaos yesterday. Once again, he advises her to leave, but she stubbornly stays, telling him that she won't go away. Jeremy gets angry, highlighting his consideration for her, but she reveals that she's his personal maid, so whether or not he likes it, she's going to stay. In fact, she promises to dodge a flying book better next time if that's what he's worried about. Speechless, Jeremy gets back under the covers, telling her to remember her stubbornness when he was being considerate of her. Left alone, Haley feels grateful for not being kicked out. She then decides to tidy up the room, and after a few hours, the room is sparkling clean. While she decides that that's it for today, looking for what to do next, her gaze lands on a corner of the room that she forgot to clean. She goes to the table with the intention of moving those books when a book attracts her attention. It turns out to be Jeremy's diary, where he's been taking notes since childhood. Haley discovers that he has no recollection of the sessions when the Marquis extracts his powers. The poor guy labels it as a loss of memory at frequent intervals. One of the incidents includes meeting his father in his study and waking up in his room after one day. Another day, he noted that there's some kind of misunderstanding, as the doctor came to check on him, but didn't find any illness. On another occasion, he's noted a loss of memory span of 3 days. He's told to stay quiet in his room until his father comes up with a solution. That's when it clicks in Haley's mind. As a reader, she found it strange that he never tried to escape despite having the power to destroy the whole world. Turns out the Marquis had been using drugs to erase his memories and hence continued being his father, a person that Jeremy trusted the most. Haley wonders if he'd hate her for exposing the truth when the side effects of the medicine wear off, since that's her intention. He seems to have contracted a fever, so she places a wet towel on his forehead to bring it down. Seeing that he's awake, she inquires if he's feeling better and whether he'd like to eat, but the first thing that comes out of Jeremy's mouth is, "Why didn't you run away?" Haley looks confused and asks if she was supposed to run away. She watches him stammer with an embarrassed face as he points out that she's a witness to all the destruction he caused yesterday, so she must think that he's a monster. However, he's struck as she brushes his remarks off like nothing. If anything, she tells him that there are several kinds of monsters in this world, but he doesn't fall into any of those categories. His outburst wasn't intentional. Besides, he was considerate enough not to drag her into that disaster. His kindness sets him apart from the monsters. Jeremy's left flustered at her compliments and acts like a tender, telling her that he's nothing to give her, even if she flatters him like that. However, he's set for another compliment as Haley points out that he's kind enough to consider giving her something if he had it in his possession. He doesn't respond to her praise, but internally wonders what's wrong with his maid. Following that day, he starts to loosen up a bit to her. As days pass by, Jeremy returns to his childlike appearance while his room finally starts to look tidied up, thanks to Haley. Given his softer demeanor towards her, she expects to be able to move forward with her plans smoothly. That morning, she picks some fresh flowers from the garden while thinking about the relatively good future ahead when she overhears some maids gossiping. It's revealed that the Saintess has gone missing. For a moment, Haley fails to identify which Saintess they're talking about because the Solero Empire has only one Saintess, Daisy. She's the novel's angelic heroine, and there is no mention of her disappearance in the novel. Haley rushes to the group of maids engrossed in the gossip and inquires about how she went missing. The maid, although a bit startled, reveals that she doesn't know many details except that the temple is in an uproar. They've sent the news to the Empire as well as the kingdom, so she hopes that the Saintess would be found soon. Haley too hopes that she'd be fine because it's impossible for her to leave on her own. She fears that something suspicious might be at play here. The next day, she runs to Jeremy's chamber, afraid that she's late. She had stayed up late overthinking the situation of her master's future lover going missing and woke up late. As soon as she enters his room, Jeremy comments on her lateness, while he himself is engrossed in writing something diligently. She apologizes for coming late and promises to be careful in the future while internally screaming that his future girlfriend has gone missing. He doesn't probe the matter further and instructs her to drink some water. She wonders if he just showed concern for her and compares the situation to that one time when she used to take care of a stray cat that eventually got closer to her. As if delighted, she promises to stay by his side and serve him faithfully until marriage does them apart. Since the topic comes up, he asks if she's committed or has someone in mind. Haley's response that she's quite popular despite her looks makes him laugh at her as he mentions that she's quite a smooth talker. She brushes it off and turns her attention to whatever he's been writing so diligently since earlier. He simply tells her that it's his homework. She's bewildered to see a stack of notebooks completed by his side, wondering if he got so much homework. Jeremy too requests her to stay quiet for some time so he can finish the task at hand before he can further elaborate on the consequences of incomplete homework. The door to his room opens, and in steps a scrawny-looking teacher. The man comments on Jeremy's study style as soon as he comes in and arrogantly asks Jeremy if he's finished his homework, although he refers to the young man as my lord. Haley notices that his speech is devoid of any respect for the second young master of the family. Meanwhile, Jeremy's demeanor shifts to that of a scared child as he meekly mentions that he only has one book left to complete. Haley finds it hard to control her anger when the teacher calls Jeremy a flawed human while reminding him that he won't be able to marry even after his coming-of-age ceremony. The Solero Empire has a strange law that the individuals who fail to marry after completing their coming-of-age ceremony are considered incomplete, therefore forced to take lessons just like Jeremy, who's being bullied by this tutor into writing an insane amount of homework. The man goes as far as to blackmail him, threatening to report his attitude to the Marquis. Haley thinks that he's going too far and tries to interrupt the conversation, but Jeremy beats her to it. He requests the teacher to give him a little more time to complete the task and not report him to his father. Haley notices the man secretly smirking at her young master's misery before he acts magnanimous by giving him one last chance. With that, he adds a pile of books to the homework that he's meant to complete by the end of the day. Haley notices Jeremy's hand that's bruised and shivering as he obediently promises to meet his tutor's expectations the next time. The Baron then turns to her, asking for her reason to interrupt the lesson. Once again, Jeremy doesn't let her speak and apologizes in her place for forgetting to prepare the tea. He reasons it as her being new to the job while also signaling her to stay quiet by pulling at her skirt from behind the table. Haley decides to go along with his story and excuses herself to prepare the tea. However, her anger is hard to subside at having to treat someone respectfully when they misbehaved with her master. Moreover, she fails to find any logic in just copying everything over and over as a lesson. Jeremy's hand also looked hurt, and had he had the Saintess by his side, she'd have taken care of both the pain and that measly side character. On the other hand, she's only capable of boiling tea, like an incompetent maid. Haley even imagines beating up the tutor to avenge her young master, when suddenly a thought surfaces in her mind. She returns to the study with a fragrant, attractive pot of tea, only to see the tutor scolding Jeremy for taking too long to complete his write-up. Jeremy can only apologize while hurrying to finish it when his attention shifts to Haley placing tea on the table. Even the tutor can't help but inquire if it's rosehip tea. Haley cheerfully informs him that it's cherry rosehip tea and praises his knowledge about teas. Immediately flattering him, she goes on to impress him by talking about various facts regarding the delicateness of tea symbolism while brewing him a cup of this pleasant-looking beverage. Haley doesn't forget to add that she brewed it in a manner that would certainly impress him. The teacher looks beyond flattered to be at the receiving end of such a beautiful maid's admiration and pretends to accept the beverage as if doing her a favor. However, a sip of that liquid sends him spitting it out and throwing the cup across the room. He interrogates what type of rubbish he's been served, and Jeremy's protective instinct immediately kicks in as he stands up to defend his maid. Haley, meanwhile, apologizes profusely for a rookie mistake, admitting that she may have ruined the tea by adding a lot of tea leaves. The Baron is flattered by the excessive amount of praise that she showers him with while seeking an apology for being called handsome. His demeanor changes to that of a magnanimous person as he lets her off with the advice not to fall too deeply for him. Once again, Haley thanks him for his generosity before turning to look at Jeremy with a smug look. Jeremy, on the other hand, is left fuming at the tutor's useless pride. On the other hand, Haley watches the Baron compose himself before requesting her to clear the table so they can continue the lesson. She's puzzled to see that Jeremy's being handed medicine during the lesson, and the Baron explains that they're going to extract mana. The information sends her off the loop because she knows that he doesn't have mana in his body. Only mages are capable of producing mana in their body, and her young master isn't one of them. So, what's it that they have been extracting from his body till now? She watches in horror as Jeremy takes the medicine in his hand and tries to materialize the mana running in his blood. Failure to do so earns him a couple of hits before he's instructed to try one more time. Moreover, the Baron threatens to report him to the Marquis, a move that Jeremy's terribly scared of, so he puts his all into trying to condense the mana, and soon dark energy materializes in his hands. Haley's immediately warned that it's not mana that he's instructed to gather and shape into a stone. However, he fails to remember where she's seen that familiar magic circle. Jeremy succeeds in condensing a ball that is named as a mana stone by the Baron while he's busy instructing the young man to shape it to the best of his abilities. Haley cracks the goal of this lesson. The lesson is actually another trick by the Marquis to extract Jeremy's power. Since he can't extract too much in one session, he came up with this idea to regularly drain the second young master's power without causing his death. Taking advantage of the Baron's distraction, she takes out a drawing pin from the notice board, feeling pleased at finally being able to do something. She puts it to good use before returning to pick utensils from the table. When she's instructed to put some tea cakes for the Baron to enjoy, he then decides to take a break and instructs Jeremy to use this time to shape the so-called mana stone in his hand. Jeremy keeps acting mighty, calling the break a waste of time while plopping down at his chair. The next moment, his shrieks resound in the study room. Jeremy instantly turns to look at his exclusive maid, who in turn winks at him, proving his worst suspicion true that it's her doing. Meanwhile, the Baron looks beyond furious as he vows to teach her a lesson. This time, Haley pretends to be oblivious to what he's talking about. She wonders aloud if it was already stuck in the chair. But the Baron, named Ja, refuses to buy this reason. He almost shouts at her to put his point across that a pushpin is impossible to be blown away by the wind since someone has to take responsibility whenever a noble is injured. Ja announces to punish her. Haley buckles up for the upcoming pain, but it never arrives as Jeremy interrupts the strike. He takes the blame for dropping the thumbtack while playing and demands to be punished instead. As expected, the Baron gets tempted by the offer and turns to punish him despite Haley's protests. He calls it logical to put a lord's words above a maid's. Jeremy, too, doesn't let her intervene much and closes his eyes for the upcoming slap, but she steps forward to take the hit. Startled, he calls out to her, leading Haley to feel honored for being called by her name. She protectively hides the protagonist behind herself and threatens the Baron to report this matter to the Marquis. The man looks amused at the prospect of getting punished for merely disciplining a maid. That's where Haley's knowledge from the novel comes in handy. She flips the story by calling his action of hitting her an attempt to silence her. As for what she was being forced to be quiet about, she reveals that Jeremy's excessive homework contradicts the Marquis' order, as his role entails extracting the young master's power in its most perfect form. However, the Baron was exhausting Jeremy with unnecessary assignments, thus hindering his ability to use his powers perfectly. Joe watches in horror as the maid in front of him announces to ensure that the Baron hears about it from her. Haley includes his attempt at extending the lesson period to enjoy more benefits and adds that her injury would be proof of his attempt to silence her when she tried to expose him. The Marquis is set to believe her, given the incomplete power orb that he's going to present to him. Bewildered, the tutor tries to establish his superiority with the fact that the Marquis himself chose him for this task, but Haley remains firm in her statement that everyone is replaceable in this estate. In fact, people of the second young master's secret are normally made to disappear from the face of the world. However, considering his past relationship with the Baron, he'd be fortunate enough to be allowed to leave. The tutor is scared out of his wits and runs away with the excuse that her nonsense is unbearable. Haley smugly calls after him to inquire about Jeremy's homework, but he gets away with a "do whatever you deem fit." As soon as the episode is over, she drops to the ground with relief. When Jeremy approaches her, he's speechless at the stunt she just pulled. He brushes off her wanting to look at his hands to ensure that he's all right and states that they could choose silence over making things worse, like now. Haley explains her helplessness in this situation. Despite getting his point, seeing that she understands his wish not to make a big deal out of it, Jeremy instructs her to stay quiet the next time. But Haley cuts in, crying her eyes out while stating her inability to stand by and watch him get hit. She is determined to step in if a situation like this arises in the future as well. Jeremy is baffled to watch tears constantly slip down her face and innocently inquires if she's crying. She embarrassedly responds that she's not and tells him not to disturb her for an hour. An hour later, he finds himself sitting in a squeaky clean bathtub. He had expected this maid to finally leave him like others, but here she was, bringing his meals diligently and preparing a warm bath for him. Jeremy doesn't even remember the last time he soaked in a bath before she arrived. He reminisces about her strange behavior for sticking to serving him, even though he has nothing to give her back. The first time they met, she just laughed off his comments about being a monster, never believing them. He finds her to be a strange one for being the first person ever to treat him well. As night arrives, Haley visits him again to tidy up the bathroom and finds him standing by the window, gazing at the stars. She gets worried that he may catch a cold, but he lightly brushes it off with the comment that his body is warm. Seeing this, she offers to dry his hair and goes ahead to do so while he quietly watches her. Jeremy inquires if it's all right to talk now, and she sheepishly apologizes for walking out earlier. However, she's still adamant about refusing to stand by and watch him in pain should a situation arise in the future. He doesn't pursue the matter and simply calls her stubborn, while she says it's something that can't be helped. Internally, she feels guilty for trying to use Jeremy, even if her intentions are to save the world. Helping and protecting him is the least she can do to ease the guilt. Once done with his hair, she asks him if he'd like to go to bed, and a positive response sends her rushing to clean up so he can rest. Jeremy stops her in her tracks and hands her a vial, telling her to drink the contents inside. He reveals that it's medicine for her swollen cheek, making Haley wonder if it's the famous magic potion. Of course, she doesn't forget to tease the young master for being so considerate, while he acts unbothered, instructing her to just drink it. As soon as the medicine is taken, Not only does Haley's swollen cheek get better, but she feels a rush of energy in her entire body, feeling brand new. She looks at him with moved expressions before complaining that it's bitter. The poor girl is disappointed big time to discover that the pink-colored liquid medicine wasn't strawberry-flavored. Jeremy tries to reason that it's medicine after all. He then decides to retire for the night when Haley calls out to him once again and thanks him for everything, including his help earlier and the medicine. The little man simply smiles back at her.